The static crackled through the bridge of the ESS Endeavour, a sound that Captain Sarah Chen had learned to treat with healthy skepticism during her 15 years in deep space. The exploration vessel's sensors had picked up something unusual, a repeating pattern that didn't match any known natural phenomena. "What do you make of it, Dr. Reynolds?" Chen asked, turning to her chief science officer, who was hunched over his station, his weathered face illuminated by holographic displays. "It's definitely artificial, Captain. The signal pattern suggests it's some kind of distress beacon." But Reynolds paused, his fingers dancing across the controls. "The technology is like nothing we've encountered before. The quantum signature is elegant." The Endeavour led a fleet of 3 human exploration vessels, modest-looking ships that belied their true capabilities. Humanity had learned long ago that appearing unassuming often provided tactical advantages. While their ships looked utilitarian from the outside, they housed some of the most advanced technology ever developed by human hands. "All ships reporting ready, Captain," announced Commander Paddle, her first officer. "The Horizon and Pathfinder are maintaining formation." Chen nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Well then, let's see who's calling for help. Plot and intercept course." As the human fleet adjusted their trajectory, they were unaware that their presence had already triggered a cascade of alarms across the Zorn Empire's border monitoring stations. The Zorn, a species that had dominated their sector of the galaxy for millennia, prided themselves on their technological superiority and military might. High Commander Vexthor of the Zorn Imperial Fleet stood before the massive holographic display, his iridescent scales shifting colors with barely contained irritation. "These primitives dare to enter our space without authorization," he growled, studying the sensor readings of the approaching human vessels. His second-in-command, Sub-Commander Krell, analyzed the data with characteristic thoroughness. The vessels appeared to be using basic fusion drives, minimal shielding. No signs of quantum technology or advanced weapon systems. They seemed to be explorers. Vexthor's facial tentacles twitched in amusement. Explorers, in ships that wouldn't last a cycle in the void. "Deploy the 7th Battle Group. Let's show these primitives what real spacefaring civilization looks like." Within minutes, a dozen Zorn warships materialized around the human fleet. Their hulls gleamed with an otherworldly metallic sheen, covered in patterns that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. Each ship was at least twice the size of the human vessels, bristling with weapon ports and protected by shields that gave off a subtle purple glow. Captain Chen studied the Zorn ships with professional interest, noting their positioning, their weapon configurations, and most importantly, their assumptions. Her crew maintained their calm, years of training evident in their measured responses. "They're hailing us," reported Lieutenant Park from communications. "Put them through," Chen ordered, straightening in her chair. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing High Commander Vexthor in all his alien glory. His tentacled face and towering form were designed to intimidate, but Chen had seen far stranger things in her years of exploration. "Attention primitive vessels." Vexthor's voice boomed through the channel. "You have entered restricted Imperial space. Your technology is laughably outdated, your ships are inferior, and your presence here is an insult to the Zorn Empire. Power down your systems and prepare to be boarded or be destroyed." Chen's response was calm and measured, though those who knew her well could detect the hint of amusement in her voice. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Spaceship Endeavour. We're responding to a distress beacon. Is this your emergency signal, High Commander?" Vexthor's tentacles writhed in confusion at her casual response. "Distress beacon? There are no distress signals in this sector. Your primitive sensors must be malfunctioning." "Interesting," Chen replied, sharing a knowing look with Dr. Reynolds. "Because we're picking up a very sophisticated quantum-level transmission about 3 light minutes from here. If it's not yours, perhaps we should investigate together." The suggestion seemed to further agitate the Zorn commander. "You dare to suggest cooperation? Your vessels couldn't possibly detect quantum signals. You're either lying or delusional." Chen smiled, the kind of smile that had preceded many surprising turns of events in her career. Why don't you scan the coordinates we're transmitting now? We'd be very interested in your assessment of the signal. As the Zorn ships received the coordinates, their sensors confirmed what the humans had detected. Vexthor's expression shifted from dismissive to confused, then to suspicious. How had these supposedly primitive ships detected something his own border sensors had missed? "This changes nothing," he declared, trying to maintain his authoritative tone. "You will still submit to Imperial authority. Your ships are surrounded, your technology is inferior, and you have no choice but to comply." About that, Chen's smile never wavered. "I should mention that we've been broadcasting our conversation across all frequencies, including the one used by your distress beacon. And it seems," she glanced at her console, "we're about to have company." The space around them suddenly lit up with new energy signatures, far more powerful than anything the Zorn ships were displaying. The ancient beacon, silent for millennia, had been waiting for exactly this kind of encounter, a test of character as much as capability. The Zorn fleet's sensors were suddenly overwhelmed with readings they couldn't comprehend, and High Commander Vexthor realized that his assumption about humanity's technological capabilities might have been the first of many mistakes he would come to regret. As new players emerged from the quantum depths of space, Captain Chen settled back in her chair, ready for what promised to be a very interesting first contact situation. Sometimes, she reflected, the best technology wasn't the most flashy. It was the kind that let you choose the perfect moment to reveal your true capabilities. The game was about to change, and humanity, as usual, was already several moves ahead. The emergence of the new energy signatures sent the Zorn battle group into chaos. From quantum space materialized three massive structures, each one dwarfing even the largest Zorn vessels. They were clearly artificial but bore designs that defied conventional engineering, geometric patterns that seemed to fold in on themselves in impossible ways. High Commander Vexthor's scales had shifted to a pale blue, a sign of extreme stress in his species. "Impossible," he whispered, watching as his sensors tried and failed to analyze the structures. "These readings, they can't be right." "Oh, those old things." Captain Chen's voice carried a hint of satisfaction. "We call them the Sentinels. They've been waiting here for quite a while, it seems. Interesting that they chose to reveal themselves now." The Zorn commander's facial tentacles writhed in confusion. "You knew about these structures." "The beacon wasn't just a distress signal, Commander," Dr. Reynolds cut in, his voice carrying across the still-open channel. "It was a test, one that your empire has failed repeatedly over the centuries, apparently." The Sentinels began to emit a soft, pulsing light that seemed to bend the very fabric of space around them. The Zorn ship's advanced shields flickered uncertainly, while the seemingly primitive human vessels remained unaffected. Lieutenant Park's console lit up with new data. "Captain, the Sentinels are transmitting. It's a historical record." Holographic displays sprang to life across both fleets, showing scenes from countless first contact scenarios throughout the galaxy's history. The Zorn Empire featured prominently, always approaching new civilizations with the same arrogance, the same dismissal of apparently inferior technology. "You see, Commander," Chen explained, her tone now serious, "humanity learned something important during our early days of space exploration. True advancement isn't just about having the biggest ships or the most powerful weapons. It's about understanding when to use them, and more importantly, when not to." As if to emphasize her point, the outer hull of the ESS Endeavour began to shift. What had appeared to be simple metallic plating rippled like water, revealing layers of technology that had been perfectly concealed. The other human ships underwent similar transformations. "Quantum metamaterials," Dr. Reynolds explained, noting the shock on the Zorn commander's face. "They don't just hide our technology. They let us integrate with it in ways your sensors couldn't detect. We didn't build bigger ships. We built smarter ones." The Zorn battle group's tactical officer reported in panic. "High Commander, their weapons systems, They're unlike anything in our database. The energy signatures suggest capabilities far beyond our estimates. Vexthor's pride warred with his tactical training. This changes nothing. We still have superior numbers, and the Empire does not bow to tricks and deception. Interesting choice of words, Chen replied calmly. Commander Patel, would you mind giving our friends a small demonstration? The ESS Horizon, previously the most unassuming of the 3 human ships, activated its primary defense system. A web of quantum filaments spread out around it, each strand thinner than a human hair, but capable of redirecting energy at the subatomic level. When the nearest Zorn ship fired a warning shot, the energy was caught in the quantum web, redirected and transformed. Instead of destruction, the Zorn weapon's energy manifested as a complex holographic display showing the history of human space exploration, their failures, their learning, their gradual understanding that appearances could be deceiving. We could have come out here with massive warships, Chen continued. We could have built weapons that would make your empire's finest technology look like children's toys. But we chose a different path. We built ships that could adapt, learn, and most importantly, choose when to show their strength. The Sentinel's light pulsed again, and new data flooded the Zorn ship's computers. It was a record of every civilization that had found the beacon, and how they had responded to its test. The Zorn Empire's repeated failures stood in stark contrast to humanity's measured approach. Your empire has dominated this sector through fear and a presumption of superiority, Chen stated. But the beacon wasn't looking for the strongest civilization. It was looking for the wisest. Vexthor's command staff watched in stunned silence as their sensors finally penetrated the humans' now revealed technology. The complexity of the systems, the elegant integration of quantum mechanics with conventional physics, the sheer creativity of the design, it all spoke of a civilization that had taken a fundamentally different approach to technological advancement. The choice is yours, Commander, Chen offered. We can continue this demonstration, or we can talk about why those sentinels have been waiting here for so long, and what they mean for the future of both our peoples. The Zorn commander looked at his tactical display, then at the impossible structures hanging in space around them, and finally at the human ships that had so completely upended his understanding of technological progress. His scales shifted to a deep purple, a color of resignation, and perhaps a touch of respect. Perhaps, Vexthor said slowly, it is time for the Empire to learn some new lessons. The tension in space began to ease, but Captain Chen knew this was just the beginning. The real challenge would be helping the Zorn understand that true power didn't come from dominance, but from knowing when to set it aside in favor of understanding. As the human and Zorn ships began to power down their weapons, the Sentinel's light took on a warmer hue. After millennia of waiting, they had finally found what they were looking for. A civilization that understood that the greatest strength often lies in choosing not to use it. In the hours following the initial confrontation, the human and Zorn ships maintained an uneasy formation around the ancient sentinels. The massive structures continued their silent vigil, their quantum signatures pulsing in patterns that Dr. Reynolds and his team worked tirelessly to decipher. It's like they're speaking in pure mathematics, Reynolds muttered, his holographic displays now filled with cascading equations. Every pulse, every energy fluctuation. It's all part of a larger message. Captain Chen stood behind him, watching the patterns shift and flow. And what are they saying, Doctor? They're not just telling us what they are. They're showing us what we could become. Reynolds highlighted a particular sequence. These structures aren't just ancient artifacts. They're templates, teaching tools left behind by something far beyond either of our civilizations. On the Zorn flagship, High Commander Vexthor was facing a crisis of his own. His subordinates were divided. Some advocated for an immediate retreat to regroup with the main Imperial fleet, while others insisted they couldn't show such weakness before an inferior species. High Commander, Sub-Commander Krell interrupted his thoughts. We're detecting unusual activity from the human vessels. The ESS Pathfinder had begun deploying what appeared to be small, autonomous probes. Each one was no larger than a human hand, but they moved with incredible precision, forming a complex three-dimensional grid around the Sentinels. Captain Chen. Vexthor's voice carried a note of warning across the comm channel. Explain these deployments. Quantum mapping drones, Chen replied casually. Don't worry, Commander. They're purely analytical tools. Dr. Reynolds, why don't you share what we're seeing? The sensor data from the human drones began streaming to the Zorn ships. The mathematical patterns became clearer, revealing layers of information hidden within the Sentinel's quantum structure. It was like reading a book written in the language of physics itself. Fascinating, Krell breathed, his scientific curiosity temporarily overriding his imperial training. These patterns, they're showing us how to manipulate space-time at a fundamental level. That's just the beginning, Reynolds added. The Sentinels aren't just teaching us about technology. They're teaching us about cooperation, about the dangers of technological arrogance. Each pulse is a lesson learned from civilizations that destroyed themselves by focusing on power rather than understanding. The tension in space shifted as both fleets became absorbed in the data streaming from the Sentinels. It was a repository of knowledge beyond anything either civilization had encountered, but it came with a price. It could only be fully understood by working together. Your ships, Vexthor said slowly, they were designed with this kind of technology in mind, weren't they? You've encountered something like this before. Chen smiled. Not exactly. But humanity learned early on that the most advanced technology often looks nothing like what you'd expect. We built our ships to be adaptable, to interface with any kind of technological system we might encounter. The fact that they complement the Sentinel's technology so well, that's just a happy coincidence. As if in response to her words, the quantum grid created by the human drones began to resonate with the Sentinels. The space between the ships lit up with holographic representations of different technological paths, some leading to destruction, others to transcendence. Look at this, Reynolds highlighted a particular sequence. The Sentinels are showing us alternate histories, civilizations that chose different paths. The Zorn Empire's current trajectory, he paused diplomatically, shows signs of decay. Krell finished, earning a sharp look from his commander. The same patterns that preceded the fall of dozens of other empires that prioritized military might over technological harmony. Vexthor's scales shifted through several colors as he processed this information. And humanity's path. We're not perfect, Chen admitted. We've made plenty of mistakes, but we learned from them. Our ships might look simple, but they represent thousands of years of human ingenuity focused on understanding rather than dominating. The Sentinel's pulses intensified, and new patterns emerged in the quantum grid. The drones began mapping what appeared to be instructions, blueprints for technologies that could only be developed through cooperation between different species, different ways of thinking. This was never about showing technological superiority, Reynolds explained, his voice filled with wonder. The Sentinels are offering both our civilizations a chance to evolve beyond our current limitations, but only if we can work together. A new signal emanated from the Sentinels, stronger than before. The quantum grid translated it into a clear message. The test continues. Cooperation or elimination. Choose. Vexthor's command staff fell silent. Centuries of imperial doctrine clashed with the undeniable evidence before them. Their civilization stood at a crossroads, and their next decision would determine not just their fate, but possibly that of the entire galaxy. Perhaps, Vexthor said finally, his scales settling into a deep blue of contemplation. It is time for the Empire to play a different kind of game. One where victory is measured not in conquests, but in understanding. Captain Chen nodded, knowing that the real challenge was just beginning. The chess game between civilizations had entered a new phase, one where the pieces weren't ships or weapons, but ideas and possibilities. As human and Zorn scientists began to work together to decipher the Sentinel's messages, the ancient structures pulsed with approval. After eons of waiting, They had found civilizations capable of learning the hardest lesson of all, that true power lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to create together. The next 48 hours aboard the ESS Endeavour felt like a crash course in galactic diplomacy. The ship's conference room had been converted into an impromptu joint research center, where human and Zorn scientists worked side by side, their earlier animosity forgotten in the face of the Sentinel's revelations. Dr. Reynolds stood before a hovering display of quantum data, gesturing animatedly as he spoke with Krell, who had proven to be an unexpectedly enthusiastic research partner. "The mathematical precision is incredible," Reynolds marveled. "Each layer of information unlocks only when we solve the previous puzzle together. And each solution requires both our species' perspectives," Krell added, his tentacles waving in excitement. "The Empire's quantum mechanics combined with human intuitive physics. It's like the Sentinels designed these puzzles specifically for this kind of collaboration." Captain Chen watched from the doorway, noting how the Zorn and human crews had begun to mirror each other's working patterns. Even High Commander Vexthor, still struggling with his pride, couldn't deny the progress they were making together. "Your ship's adaptability is remarkable," Vexthor admitted, standing beside Chen. "We assumed the simplified exterior meant primitive technology, but now I see it's quite the opposite. Your vessels can reconfigure themselves at the quantum level." Chen nodded. "Humanity learned long ago that the most advanced technology often looks deceptively simple. We built our ships to be living laboratories, capable of interfacing with any form of technology we might encounter. The real breakthrough wasn't in making them powerful, it was in making them understand." A sudden surge of energy from the Sentinels interrupted their conversation. The quantum grid created by the human drones flickered with new patterns, and the structures began to move for the first time since their appearance. "All stations, report," Chen commanded, returning to the bridge with Vexthor close behind. "The Sentinels are realigning," Reynolds reported, his fingers dancing across his console. "They're forming some kind of gateway configuration." The three massive structures had indeed begun to shift, their impossible geometries folding and unfolding until they created a triangular formation. Energy coursed between them, forming what appeared to be a stable quantum aperture in the center. "Imperial Command is demanding answers," Krell announced from his temporary station on the Endeavour. "They're tracking the energy signatures from half a sector away." Vexthor's scales shifted nervously. "The Empire will send reinforcements. They won't understand what's happening here." "Then help them understand," Chen suggested. "Your people respect strength. Show them a different kind of power." The aperture between the Sentinels stabilized, and a new message began streaming through the quantum grid. Reynolds and Krell worked frantically to decode it, their expressions growing more astonished with each passing moment. "Captain," Reynolds called out, his voice filled with awe, "the Sentinels. They're not just teachers. They're gateways. This whole region of space was designed as a testing ground for emerging civilizations." "A testing ground for what?" Vexthor demanded. The answer came in the form of a cascade of images projected through the quantum grid. They showed countless civilizations reaching this same point, some choosing cooperation and advancement, others falling back into conflict and eventual extinction. "It's an invitation," Krell realized, his tentacles writhing with excitement. "The Sentinels are offering access to a network, a galactic community of species that passed the test." The implications hit both crews like a physical force. This wasn't just about first contact between humans and the Zorn Empire. It was about admission to something far greater. "Imperial reinforcements will arrive in 6 hours, Vexthor's tactical officer reported through the comm. Chen turned to the Zorn commander. "It seems we're both about to face a test of our own. Your empire needs to choose between its old ways and a new path forward." Vexthor stood silent for a long moment, his scales shifting through a rainbow of colors before settling on a deep, resolute purple. "Then perhaps it's time to show them what real power looks like." Over the next few hours, human and Zorn crews worked together to prepare for the arrival of the Imperial fleet. But instead of preparing for battle, they were documenting their discoveries, preparing presentations, and crafting a message that would shake the Empire to its foundations. When the Imperial reinforcements arrived, a fleet of over 50 warships, they found something unprecedented. Zorn and human ships working in perfect harmony, their combined technology interfacing with ancient structures that defied Imperial understanding. High Commander Vex Thor addressed his people, his message broadcast across all Imperial channels. For centuries, we have measured our civilization's worth by our ability to dominate others. Today, we stand at the threshold of something greater. The humans have shown us that true power lies not in weapons or conquest, but in the ability to adapt, to understand, and to grow beyond our limitations. The quantum aperture pulsed with invitation, offering both civilizations a chance to step into a larger universe. But first, they would have to prove they could set aside millennia of prejudice and pride. As the Imperial fleet processed this revelation, Captain Chen allowed herself a small smile. Sometimes, the greatest victories came not from overwhelming force, but from showing others a better way forward. The tables had turned not through violence or dominance, but through understanding and cooperation. The real challenge was just beginning, helping two vastly different civilizations take their first steps into a galaxy far more complex and interconnected than either had imagined. But as Chen watched human and Zorn crews working side by side, she knew they had already passed the most important test, learning to see strength in their differences rather than using them as an excuse for conflict. The quantum aperture hung in space like a doorway made of light, its edges rippling with possibilities. The combined human-Zorn research team had spent days decoding the final messages from the Sentinels, each revelation more extraordinary than the last. But now came the moment of truth. The Imperial fleet remained in formation, their initial aggressive stance softened by confusion and wonder. On their screens, the impossible became possible as human ships demonstrated technologies that seemed to defy the laws of physics, not through brute force, but through elegant understanding of the universe's deeper principles. "The network is stabilizing," Dr. Reynolds announced, his voice carrying the weight of hours without sleep. "We're receiving signals from, well, everywhere." Through the quantum grid, images began to flow. They showed thousands of civilizations, each unique, each having passed their own tests at similar crossroads. Some were so alien they defied description, others surprisingly familiar. All had learned the same crucial lesson. Evolution came through cooperation, not competition. The Sentinels weren't just waiting for technically advanced species. Captain Chen explained to the assembled commanders of both fleets, her words broadcast across all ships. They were waiting for civilizations mature enough to handle that advancement responsibly. High Commander Vex Thor, his scales now a steady blue of certainty, addressed his fellow Imperial officers. For 10,000 years, the Zorn Empire has prided itself on technological superiority. Yet in less than a week, these humans have shown us that our understanding was incomplete. The quantum aperture pulsed, and new data streamed through the grid. It showed the possible futures branching out before them, paths of advancement that neither civilization could achieve alone, but together. "It's not just about technology," Krell explained, his tentacles moving in patterns that the human crew had learned meant excitement. "The Sentinels are showing us how different species working together can achieve things that would be impossible separately. The quantum resonance between different types of consciousness creates new possibilities." As if to demonstrate, the human ships began a transformation. Their quantum metamaterials rippled and shifted, incorporating principles from Zorn technology that they had learned over the past days. The Zorn ships, in turn, adapted human innovations into their systems, creating hybrid technologies that exceeded the capabilities of either design. "Imperial Command is requesting guidance," reported one of Vex Thor's officers. They don't know how to proceed." "Then let us show them," Vex Thor replied, his voice carrying new authority. "Humanity has taught us that true strength lies not in dominating others, but in growing together. Perhaps it's time for the Empire to evolve." Captain Chen stepped forward. The Sentinels have offered us membership in something greater than either of our civilizations, but they're clear about one thing: we can only proceed together. Through the quantum grid, they could see other gateways activating across the galaxy. Other civilizations watching, waiting to see if these newcomers would join their community of cooperation and shared advancement. Think of it, Reynolds said, standing beside Krell at their shared research station. All the different ways our species see the universe, combined, not competing, learning from each other instead of fighting over who's right. The Sentinel's final message translated through the grid: the path is open. The choice is yours. Together, or not at all. Captain Chen looked at Commander Vexthor. Well, ready to make history. Vexthor's scales shifted through a rainbow of colors before settling on a brilliant gold, a color none of his crew had ever seen him display before. The Empire has spent millennia trying to prove its superiority. Perhaps it's time we proved our wisdom instead. The decision rippled through both fleets. Humans and Zorn, working together, began the complex process of interfacing their ships with the quantum aperture. The Sentinels hummed with approval, their ancient purpose finally fulfilled in this sector of space. As the gateway prepared to open, Chen couldn't help but smile at the irony. The Zorn had initially dismissed human ships as primitive, never realizing that true advancement wasn't about having the biggest weapons or the most impressive technology. It was about having the wisdom to know when to use them, when to adapt, and when to reach out to others. All ships report ready, Commander Patel announced. Then let's take this next step together, Chen replied, sharing a look with Vexthor. Not as humans and Zorn, but as explorers of something greater. The quantum aperture flared to life, opening a pathway to a galaxy far more complex and interconnected than either civilization had imagined. As their ships moved forward together, the ancient Sentinels began to fade, their purpose complete. They had found what they were looking for, not just advanced civilizations, but wise ones. In the end, humanity's greatest strength hadn't been their hidden technology or their adaptable ships. It had been their ability to show others that the universe was big enough for everyone to advance together. The last laugh wasn't about proving superiority. It was about proving that the best victory was one where everyone won. As human and Zorn ships crossed the threshold together, they carried with them a simple truth. In a universe full of wonders, the greatest achievement wasn't in standing above others, but in helping everyone rise together. The next chapter of both their histories would be written not in separate books of conquest and competition, but in a shared story of discovery and cooperation. The dawn of a new era had arrived, and it was brighter than either civilization could have imagined alone.